Bill Bender is national college football writer at The Sporting News. He joins us here on Halftime on this Friday. And, Bill, how you doing today, man? I mean, I guess I was going to ask if it's a depressing day, but we got to try to look at this in a little more of a positive light, right? Because at least the Big Ten didn't announce that they're not playing in the fall, right?
I think this is kind of the scramble mode. And, yeah, I'm trying, these radio interviews are hard because I don't want to be a message of Debbie Downer type guy. And it's just not who I am. But I even told my wife the other night, it's depressing to go on show after show and talk about the prospect of not having something we all love so much. I do think it allows them to get ahead of the game a little bit because it's becoming increasingly clear that September's probably not realistic for football. Maybe October is. Maybe I don't know that a spring season really makes sense to me, but at least they're trying. And the hope is that we can get the numbers down. So is that positive enough, or do I need to dial it up a little bit? I don't know.
Well, I guess you made me at least think that because you have like-minded schools, that's what being in a conference is all about. Like-minded schools, not just about the athletics, but also the academics that go along with it. You adhere to the same protocols. Many of those schools have not identical budgets, but budgets that are around the same vicinity. This kind of sounds like the best way to have a season to be flexible is to limit yourselves to those schools who can test the same way that you test, that are speaking to the same medical experts that you're speaking to, and essentially does show a lot of the limitations that lower-level college football has at competing with top-level college football, at least financially.
Yeah, it really is. And, some programs, with the Ivy League decision, that's a group of schools that doesn't register as far as the FBS goes in terms of the money-making machines that they are. I think I looked it up. I think there's nine schools that were over $100 million in revenue, a couple more over $90 million. These are money-making machines that they need that football. The Ivy League doesn't need that because they got, all the endowments and the scholarships and the, some of the greatest education in the world, quite frankly. So, this is an interesting time, though. And for me, I think just from a logistical standpoint, you hit it. If you're going to try to plan something, you need to have – it's easier to control 14 teams than it is 65. And I do think, and I've seen this a lot on Twitter, it calls for the need that we need a college football czar, commissioner, whatever you want to call them, to kind of oversee this whole deal.
You really do. And maybe this crisis does lead to that in some sense. You hit on something that we talk a lot about, the idea that the Power 5 schools have so much money, on the line here, television contracts and everything else that goes along with it, and 100,000 seat stadiums that they need to fill up. But what about what this change from the Big Ten does to schools out of the MAC? What if all the Power 5 leagues go to just conference schedules? Now you're dealing with smaller athletic departments who also depend upon the bye games in order to keep some of these programs afloat. Thinking like Bowling Green, like Central Michigan. That's got what's happening already right now has to at least put some trepidation in those smaller athletic departments, because I'm not sure if they can make those funds up at all.
For sure. And I think that's something that, as you keep in mind, is they need that TV money. So, as much as we mock the action and the Tuesday night games and the Sun Belt games that are on Thursday night and those kind of things, they're going to have to be creative to get that money back. Just in the MAC and Big Ten alone, that's 11 games. We kind of call them sacrifice games. And listen, I'm a MAC graduate, so went to Ohio University. I know down there I've watched Arkansas State wear them out in a couple bowl games. It didn't make me happy, but, I still follow it and take a lot of pride in following my school. So I think it's going to make it tough for those schools as well.
Speaking to Bill Bender here on Halftime, Bill, where do you think this leaves Notre Dame in this whole process? Because Arkansas has them on their schedule. We've seen the ACC come out and said the rumor is that they're going to try to support Notre Dame as much as they can. In your opinion, where does this leave Notre Dame as far as scheduling? Because it seems like it was a pretty uneven split between ACC, Big Ten, and then the sprinkle in the Pac-12 and SEC.
I think they'll be able to get to 8 or 9 just because of that ACC tie-in, and they'll work with them. And, if you pay attention to the TV contracts, they lose NBC games with Arkansas, as you mentioned. They lose that Lambeau Field game with Wisconsin that was going to be fun too. I'm a Packers fan, so I definitely thought that was going to be fun. But they still have that Clemson game on there, Louisville game on there, and those are two of the ACC's better teams. So I think, Swofford's pretty smart. He'll allow Notre Dame to wiggle in there, and then they can schedule some independence along the way. So I think Notre Dame, I guess the big question for them that's remaining is, and this is, you're seeing it with the ACC and SEC as well, with all those traditional rivalry games at the end of the season. Will we get USC Notre Dame? Will we get Louisville, Kentucky? Will we get Florida State? I mean, think about that. That game's in jeopardy now.
When do you expect the SEC to make its decision? Because I think the wide opinion is that it's going to be the SEC is going to be the last standout and eventually make their decision last. With everything happening so quick, I mean, the Ivy League happened, and this is happening eerily similar to how the cancellation of the basketball tournaments in the NCAA tournament came down. When do you think the SEC will make its move?
Probably last. But, I mean, again, this is a conference that makes a ton of money. Them and the Big Ten are both over $700 million in revenue. So that's a lot of money to consider. I think they're going to explore all the options. I think one thing that would make sense if they can pull it off with the ACC and work together is that 9-game schedule, maybe 8 in the conference and then 1 outside. So we get Clemson, South Carolina, Louisville, Kentucky, Florida State. I mean, almost every SEC school has that. And then the others could maybe schedule in a group of 5 school or something. I don't know. But if everybody goes with a conference-only model, that's going to be tough to do. I think one thing with the ACC and SEC, though, is they are the only 2 Power 5 conferences that play an 8-game schedule. And this circles back to that needing a commissioner thing, because I always use the comparison of, for those of us who love those Italian mafia movies, I mean, you've got 5 families you're dealing with, and it's hard to get all of them on the same page. Now, nobody's going to get whacked or anything, but it's still hard to get all the 5 of these conferences on the same page.
So it's kind of just gauging how you sound about it, and I think me and Phil both agree, too. I think when you look at all the options that are on the table, or what we think are options on the table, the conference-only approach, pushing back the season, pushing it to the spring, everything you've heard about it, it sounds like the conference-only approach is probably the best option that any conference is going to have at this point.
It is. It's most pragmatic, because I think what it does is it gives them till October, because you got to think, we need 6 weeks from whatever date where we feel comfortable enough to play. Then you need 6 weeks to get ready. That's been kind of the NCAA's recommendation as it is. Then you've got to work out the protocols with the logistics of getting all these players on campuses and all that kind of stuff. And then just the COVID testing protocols, which aren't universal across the board. And it's very expensive for some schools. So I think all of those things are at work. The SEC, of course, makes a ton of money. But I think it's just easier to keep 14 schools in line than it is trying to get 65 in line, at least in the current environment that we have.
I got to be honest, and I've been pushing for this for a while. Not like I expect non-conference games to not happen, but, the idea of Power 5 schools versus FCS, I've just never been into it. And I love the thought of 10 SEC conference games. I really do. I mean, I think that would be probably a higher quality of a football season than we're used to seeing. I mean, you wouldn't have any of the patsy games. Oh, no, we can make jokes about Vanderbilt and, yes, about Arkansas too, but I don't really see anything wrong with SEC playing 10 conference games. I think it would be high-quality football.
I think you got to adjust what you want to watch. I mean, I think for me, I look at the baseball season, for example, and being a regional guy here in Ohio, I think it's pretty exciting that they're just doing the NL and AL Central. 60 games, breakneck speed, a sport that normally is a 162-game march that is hard to watch sometimes. It's been sped up. And if you're dealing with the sport that, in my book, with college football, is the most regionalized of all, that's what makes it great. The ties between those SEC schools and the ACC and the Big Ten and Big 12 and Pac-12, I think it could be fantastic if they just do conference games. Because let's be honest, guys, we've had to scrounge at the bottom of the barrel for sports for months. I think we'll take any football we can get.
So I want to close on this thought, and you bring up the baseball model, and I even kicked around the idea a couple of days ago that what's happened in Major League Baseball could be the start of a radical realignment that's based upon East and West geography. Now, what about the idea of the Power 5 leagues going to a full conference-only schedule, and that could be a point where the big leagues of college football are separated from, for lack of a better term, the minor leagues of college football, Group of Five and FCS, to where you really do have like a big leagues and a big leagues junior, and the two don't really meet very often. Do you ever think that could be a possibility, and what we're seeing here could be the impetus or the breaking point or the tipping point?
We'll see. I think it's something that it's certainly a conversation, because the likelihood of a season to me kind of works from the bottom up. So we saw the Ivy League go. Now you're starting to wonder, can D3, D2, and the FCS and NAIA go? And then you wonder, can the Group of Five go with the budgets that they have? And if it comes down to it, maybe those 66 schools that are the Power Five, and I would throw up Notre Dame in there because,
sure,
guys, if there's a season, Notre Dame's getting a piece of it. Those are the schools that could potentially break off and form. And in some ways, it makes sense. I don't know how y'all do high school football down there, but I've been in states where they kind of have a Division I big boy and little boy league, if you will. And that could be what we're dealing with.
Yeah, it really does seem like we are. Bill, we'll leave it there. Appreciate the conversation. Thanks for jumping on short notice today. And maybe we can do it again and actually talk about, I don't know, football once we get to it.
Yeah, blocking and tackling maybe next time. Yeah, you guys are great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks,
you
Bill.
Got it. That's Bill Bender, National College Football writer, Sporting News. Halftime brought to you by The Fence Man, and the number is 479-782-3936. The Fence Man can help your business if you need a fence that needs more security or more curb appeal. Fence Man can get you both. They've been doing it for over 40 years. Just give them a call for a quick, no-obligations quote. That's 479-782-3936. The Fence Man is a division of Quantum Property Services. And we close out the first hour on halftime. Your calls and texts, if you want them, get with us, 877-377-6963. We will be right back.